All right, so it looks like it's 10 o'clock on the nose. We will go ahead and get started. First and foremost, if I haven't got to meet you before, my name is Colleen DeLang. I am the Director of Education here at my Source. But the reason I like to teach this class so much is I've also been a licensed realtor for 25 years. And the other thing is I used to work at a forms company called Zipform, which has been acquired by TransactionDesk. So many of my friends are still working at TransactionDesk under Lone Wolf. And so I think I probably know a few things about some time-saving tips when you are using forms, trying to find the easy buttons and fill out offers to purchase quicker. I'm also going to show you some great ways that you can really pull 90% of the information that you need to fill out transactions directly into your forms right from the MLS. I'm also going to show you if you're taking a new listing, and let's say that listing has never been listed before, I'm going to show you some great ways to pull that information directly from the tax records so you don't have to find and fill out things like those lengthy legal descriptions, addresses, school districts. All of that should be coming over directly from the source, meaning directly from the assessor's office or the property records information. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. If you haven't taken a webinar with me before, I like to keep them as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions today, if you open up your GoToWebinar panel, you'll find the questions box where you can type in a question. Please don't hold all of your questions till the end. It's much easier to simply address them when we're on that particular screen. So let's say that you have a question about filling out contracts or using the document slicer. When we're on that screen, simply fire in your question into that questions box. It'll alert me on my screen and we'll go ahead and address it. One thing I do want to make sure is I do want to make sure that everybody can hear and see me okay. There's nothing worse than going back and editing a class later on and you find out no one was really hearing you. So if I can have just one or two people just pop into that questions box and let me know that you can hear and see me okay, we'll go ahead and start today's class. All right. Perfect. Oh, thank you so much, Brittany. Great to see you here. I'm excited that you're here. Brittany's from my office, so that's always nice. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start off with some basic things. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Samuel. Normally I do these from my house, but we're in the office today meeting some people, so I'm kind of doing it a little bit backwards. But I wanted to start off with how do you make filling out your transactions a little more seamlessly? How do you use those easy buttons to pull in 90%? So we're going to play 3 roles today. We're actually going to start off on the buy side. We are going to pretend that Brittany just showed her buyer a great new listing. She's going to be writing an offer and she wants to do that quickly because there's 3 other offers coming in. So once we go through that scenario, I'm going to walk you through all the things you need to know. Like how to bring in those outside pieces, like the pre-approval. If you want to write this in the kitchen because you know that there's 3 more offers coming in, how do you bring in that pre-approval or a copy of that EMD? How do you have all of that ready? So when you're literally writing in the kitchen and your clients are signing with their fingertip to get it over to that co-oping agent right away, how do you bring in all of those pieces? So that's kind of the first part we're going to play. The second part is going to be you're listing a new property. Maybe it's never been listed before. How do you go in and seamlessly pull from the tax records to fill out that listing quickly? And then third, we're all going to go through Authentisign, which is going to be that signing process. We're not only going to go through Authentisign, but we're going to go through some new features in Authentisign. We're going to do things like sending out the seller's disclosure so that homeowner can actually fill it out before you get there. So we're going to take on some scenarios like that. So with that, I'm going to turn off my fuzzy hair today, and I'm going to just let you see more of the screen. You should be able to see my screen in just a second. It should look like that Paragon screen. That center section might look a little bit different. Don't worry if it does. Just where I'm at, the broker actually controls that center section. I know that we have quite a few people on our call from other MLSs that we vendor. So if your center section looks a little bit different, well, don't worry. It's just because depending on where you're coming in from, that center section is controlled by different associations, different MLSs, or again, might even be a broker if you're in my area. Okay, so let's get started. So we are going to say, and I'm just going to pull up a listing here from my good friend Ed Martin. Let's pretend for a moment that Brittany just showed this great property that Ed Martin has listed on 22 Mile. The last thing Brittany wants to do when her buyer is excited to write this offer, especially if there's other offers coming in, the last thing she wants to do is have to research this, now go in and fill out all these lengthy pieces that are already here, meaning that lengthy legal description, the tax ID, the taxes, all the information for that property. It's already here on the listing that you've just shown. So how do we pull that into our contracts? And let me show you the button that you're going to be looking for. So the first thing you're going to do is you're simply going to find that property in the MLS, and then you're going to see these easy buttons right here. The easy button we're looking for right now kind of looks like a blue splash. And when you run your mouse over that icon, that's going to allow you to take all the information from this specific property and load it into your purchase agreement contracts, everything from your agency addendum to your purchase agreement to hopefully you already have your buyer representation agreement signed when you were showing that buyer. But the idea is we want to pull in all of that information. And one of the great things about doing that within Transaction Desk is when you click that blue splash button, not only is it preparing your buyer side contracts, but it's also pulling in things like that's filled out seller's disclosure that was signed and filled out by the seller. It'll also pull in things like your lead-based paint disclosure. And Ed Martin does a great job. He usually has property flyers in there. Sometimes he's got a survey in there, depending on the listing. So the last thing you want to have to do is go find all these additional pieces that your buyer has to sign. That would be a pain. So we've done that for you. When you click this blue splash icon, not only is it bringing over the property information, but it's bringing all of those associated docs as well. One of the cool things about doing this is if you're at an office like mine who's went ahead and set up their listing package, their sales package, maybe a lease package, by applying that package, I'm ensuring that I'm getting all of my broker's required forms. So I don't have to go through and figure out, okay, which form do I need for this transaction? Where do I find this form? Is this a local form, a state form, an MLS form? All of those forms can be pre-assembled by the brokerage to make sure that I don't miss any required form. So when I click that blue splash, it's basically walking me through an easy to use wizard or kind of like an interface that walks you through every single step. Now, this is great in the beginning, but I also know as agents, we get really busy. So we don't always want to use a wizard. I'm going to show you how to set up one convenient dashboard today that's going to allow you to do all the things you can do in this wizard from one simple screen. So we're going to set that up today too. So lots of good stuff. The first thing you're going to see is when I clicked that blue splash icon, it brings over that property address because it's actually starting that file for me. The next most important thing is, well, what template do I want to apply? Now, here's where it gets really important to have those templates set up. I'm going to show you how to do that today. Whether you are a broker or an administrator for a brokerage, you can actually set these packages up for your agents. And I recommend doing that so each agent doesn't have to guess what's required in your transactions. Of course, if you are at a brokerage that doesn't have templates, I'm going to show you how to set up your own templates today too. But obviously, we want to use what the broker sets up. That eliminates us having to find additional forms. It also ensures that we're following our broker's requirements by loading those forms automatically. So the first thing here is I'm lucky enough to be at a broker that has a buyer package already prepared for me. So I'm simply going to elect my brokerage buyer package. By the way, if you are a broker and you're unfamiliar with how to do this, we actually have just a class for brokers on how to set up brokerage-wide templates, how to set up things like clauses so agents can insert your legal language instead of creating their own. So there is a whole separate brokerage class. I also want to mention that we are recording this class. So you can go back. I'm going to show you at the end of the class today where you can find this recording and where you can see all of these details. So just in case you have to step away at any time today, hopefully to bottom line an offer, you can go back and you can actually fast forward right to that part that you may have missed or skipped over. All right. So because I'm pulling this from the MLS, it's loading in that MLS number for me. It's pulling in that property address. Now I just have to decide, who am I representing in the transaction? Well, clearly Ed Martin has this listed, so I am going to not be on the listing side, but I'm going to be working with the buyer. So I'm going to be on that selling agent side. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to stay in the wizard just to kind of walk you through a few things, but I'm also, again, going to show you how to set an easy to use dashboard up so you don't have to use the wizard every single time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start creating this transaction. The goal here is to not have to fill out or, manually type in a lot of information. There should be literally just a couple of pieces of information that you're going to be filling out. And as you can see, that auto population has already started here. So of course, I've got the photo up here of that listing. Down here, it's already filling in the street name, street number, the city, county, state, zip code. If the subdivision was in there, it would pull in that subdivision for me as well. It's pulling in that lengthy legal description, comments about the property, that tax number, and you can see all of that is starting to auto flow. So I don't have to type all these things side or you're on the sales side, the questions are just going to be the same in the wizard. It's just which side of the transaction are you representing? That's obviously what you're going to fill in. So as we scroll down here, I can see that Ed Martin has this listed for $325. So obviously one of the key pieces we can't pull from anywhere is, what does your buyer want to pay? That's obviously in your buyer's head, right? We can't pull that from anywhere. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say we're going to offer 324.9, just keep it easy, into our purchase price. What is your EMD? What is your deposit going to be? So let's say you're going to do a $3,000 EMD. Maybe he's going to even counter that and ask for an additional. There's a place for an additional EMD too. As we go through, here's your first time-saving tip. Okay, so we're filling out obviously the purchase side, but if you want to ask for things like, let's say we are asking for the stove. We are asking for the washer and dryer, and maybe we're asking for the built-in bookshelves. I know it should be hopefully in the purchase agreement, but we're going to just put it on here just to cover ourselves. Remember that now with all of the new NAR settlement changes, your purchase agreement is also where you're going to be asking for things like if the buyer is requesting that the seller pay concessions or commissions. That's a great thing that you can add right in here to auto flow right onto your purchase agreement. So in this case, though, we're going to be asking for our stove, the washer, the dryer, the built-in bookshelves. Anything that you want to ask for in your purchase agreement, anything you want to include, this is where you want to put that. Even though it kind of looks like it's on the listing side of our wizard, by including it here, this is going to auto flow over onto your purchase agreement on any additional forms asking what you're including. If there's something you wanted to exclude, maybe there's a hideously ugly play structure that's run down in the backyard, or maybe there's a dilapidated old above ground pool and you want to ask for that to be removed before closing. That's where you would also put that. And the nice thing is if you fill the information into the wizard, it will know all of the places on all of the forms that you have in your packet that need to include that. So instead of going form by form and filling out stove, refrigerator, because my company actually has 3 forms that we actually fill the what your additional items are, like your additional appliances, or if you're including a home warranty. So instead of having to do that manually on each form, and fill it into the wizard, and it's going to take care of that for me. All right. So basically, that first step is just filling in some of the basics. All right. Looks like we have our first question. Let me jump to that. Oh, sounds like I was frozen for a moment. If anybody looks like we're back, okay, I apologize. I usually do this from home, so it's a little bit easier. I'm doing it from the office today, where sometimes the internet has a little interference. So, thanks for letting me know. And if I missed anything, I'm going to send everybody the class recording at the end. So if you did miss anything, hopefully I didn't cover too much while that happened, but it will allow you to catch up. Okay, so the first step really is simply going in and filling out that property information. By clicking that easy button, you can see most of that's already done. Really, the big piece is how much does your buyer want to pay? All right, I'm going to turn off my camera. Hopefully that will allow it to not freeze up there. Okay, so let's jump over to step 2. And literally going through the wizard, I'm just clicking the blue buttons at the top. They're allowing me to jump to the next step. Of course, it's already got the list date that Ed Martin listed the property. But now I want to go ahead and I want to pull in my date, like what is our estimated closing date? Let's say we're going to give it 45 days. What is my offer date? So I'm going to say, you know what? I am going to pull in my offer date. We'll make today. And again, if you wanted to put how long they have to apply for a mortgage, or when they will have a mortgage commitment by, you can put that in here as well. That was kind of set up when TRIG came around, if you remember back in those days. So there's a few things that you can do with dates. So I want to talk a little bit about this. However, if you are just getting familiar with TransactionDesk, you don't have to use these additional pieces. I'm going to kind of keep it middle of the road today. I'm not going to go too techy, but I do want to show you a couple additional pieces that I find helpful because they send out reminders. And especially if you're on a team where maybe multiple people on your team are doing things like maybe installing your lockbox or installing your sign or ordering your sign, there's ways you can actually incorporate your team so that they get automated reminders anytime that you take a new listing or anytime you're ready a purchase agreement. So I'm going to kind of show you that. Again, if you are not super tech savvy and you don't want to use this, you don't have to, but it's a great way to sort of streamline the process and to not miss any important steps in your transactions. So once you've got your dates established, as we did on step 2, the next piece is, do you want to do that automation? And there's 2 ways you can automate it. There can be tasks, and a task is just an item that you or someone on your team is going to be completing. Like for every new listing, a good example of a task would be putting up a sign, turning the listing paperwork into the brokerage. Brokers, you can also create required placeholders where documents have to be attached. You can even put time frames on them, which will send them automated reminders until they attach that document. But let's do some basic ones. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on tasks. When you're thinking of a checklist, though, a checklist is just a grouping of tasks. So again, if you are a brokerage and you want to set up 5 or 6 tasks that are required by your agents, like to turn in the EMD, within 48 hours, those are great examples of checklists that you can put a bunch of series of tasks together to remind your agents certain things are required. But for today, we're just going to kind of keep it basic. I'm just going to add a new task. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save my changes. I'm going to jump over to our task screen. And you can kind of see I'm doing that right by the options that are over here to the right. Time you want to jump back into your wizard, though, it's located right at the top, so you can go right back to where you left off. But I kind of want to show you some good examples of sort of automating the process of your transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I want to add a new task. And we'll just make it easy. But let's say you're picking a new listing and you want to install a sign. You could put a description in. And quite honestly, in real estate, most everything does not have a specific date, right? We're not going to install our sign every October 1st, right? That wouldn't make any sense. We're going to install our sign after we have a signed listing contract. So in this case, we want to relate it to a transaction date. You can also relate things to another task being completed. So for instance, if we've completed our home inspection, Maybe we want to base something off of that now being completed. We want to make sure to remind them, to meet with their lender. Or maybe it's a contingency situation and you want to remove a contingency. You can actually base things off of other tasks being completed. But for today, we're just going to kind of keep it really easy. We're going to say we want to relate this to a date in our transaction. So we're going to say that we want to install and we could do, let's say, one day after. We want to have that sign installed one day after that list date. Do we want a reminder? Sure. Maybe I want it one day before. So when the actual listing was signed, I want that reminder to go to me or someone on my team. If you are set up with a team in TransactionDesk, you'll see the available shares will include your team members. You can then click on who you want to share that task with. And then down below, you can notify them via email. You can notify them if a status changes on this, or you can notify everyone within your group. So really easy to create these easy tasks. Now, again, if you don't want to take it that far, if you just kind of want to use the basics of TransactionDesk, that's fine too. But I am going to hop back up to my wizard and I'm going to just complete where I left off. So I've got my transaction dates in here. Maybe you've got an offer acceptance date. You're going to add those in. So it's filling out your contracts. The idea is the more information you add into your wizard, the less information you're going to have to manually go through and add into each individual form. As we jump to step 3, you can see that we've already loaded your name as the selling agent. We've got Ed Martin, who listed the property, and both of our brokerage are listed there. I get a lot of calls, and almost every week I get this call. Colleen, why doesn't it auto-populate my seller or buyer's name? And the reason is you missed this one step, but it's really important, especially if you're going to be using Authentisign. If you miss this one small step, it's going to require you to tag all the forms every time you're working with a buyer or seller, and you don't want to have to do that. The great thing about Authentisign is it has smart tagging. So if you simply tell the program who the buyer is or who the seller is, it will know every single place to insert their signature and every place to insert a tag where they're going to be signing. So take all that extra work out. I know I used to use DocuSign a long, long time ago. You used to have to drag those tags on. Then they got a little more advanced with the templates, and that helped a little bit, but it was still a lot of applying and moving, and it just really wasn't very efficient. With this smart tagging, if you're going to tell the program who the buyer or seller is, it's going to do all of that for you. I'm also going to show you how you can add enhancements when you're using Authentisign. Things like you can add drop downs, you can add radio buttons, which will give them an option to choose A or B, but they can't select both. So I'm going to show you how to use some of those cool features in Authentisign. So here's that step that's so important. This is probably the second most important step, and it's really putting in that buyer and seller's contact information. So we're going to go in, we're going to add in this case, we are obviously working with a buyer. So we could add from our existing contacts. We could add ourselves, but we already did that for you. So in this case, we're going to create a brand new transaction contact. This is the most important step of all the steps you're going to learn today. You want to tell it in your dropdown who this party is. So Joe Fumagalli is going to be our buyer today. You can also, in your preferences, as you can see, I've actually put in a couple different options like ABC Realty. You can also, if you're commonly putting someone in and you want to group them or keep track of them, let's say it's a referral, you can also use that. You can put in a referral company in your dropdown. So you can actually customize these dropdowns. But for today, we're going to keep it nice and easy. We're going to say that this is a buyer. We're going to call him Joe Fumagalli. If anybody remembers Floyd Wickman, he used to use and these names a lot. He used to crack me up. And we're going to say Joe at buyer to. Actually, I'm going to put it back here. We're going to make it nice and simple. So in this scenario, what we're literally doing is we are putting in the buyer's first name, buyer's last name, and the buyer's email address. I'm going to actually put in my email address because I want to show you some examples when we get into the signing. The 3 names that are below the legal name, preferred signature, and preferred initials. Let me kind of explain what this is for. Um, if you are working as a, let's say you are working with someone who is a power of attorney, or you're working with someone who's selling on behalf of a corporation or buying on behalf of a corporation, or if there's a trustee situation and the attorney wants the name to be spelled out or signed in a different manner on behalf of a situation like that, like an estate or a power of attorney. Many times they don't want Joe Fumagalli signing. They want Joe Fumagalli, power of attorney for Sally Sue, or had an attorney that was very emphatic that it was even put in as the trustee date to match the will. So if the attorney wants it signed in a different way, or if they're signing in a different capacity, like power of attorney for someone, what is in the legal name will be down below the signature blank. So what you want pre-printed, if you will, below the signature. How they're signing is the preferred signature. So if they're signing Joe Fumagalli, power of attorney for Sally Sue, that's the signature that would be applied. And then obviously you can even change the preferred initials, like if you wanted the initials to be maybe the corporation name or something like that. So I always recommend adding to your address book, just leave that checked, because a lot of times if you're sending out documents to be signed in the beginning, you're going to end up sending things later on, maybe an addendum, maybe closing paperwork, and it's much easier when you just have all of their contact information right there. So for the most part, you're really just putting in first name, last name, and email address. There's even a place if you wanted to put your buyer's address in here as well. But for the most part, you're just adding those 3 additional pieces. Again, if it's power of attorney or an estate, something like that, that's what those 3 remaining fields are set up for. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to save that. Joe Fumagalli was added. If you have an attorney, or let's say Joe was married, of course, we need to add those contacts in here as well, especially when we get into the signing. There's an actual attorney role where an attorney can actually go in, review it, and either accept it or deny it, which would allow them to do that before their clients see it and sign it. So there's some cool functionality we're going to cover in there too. So that's it. Basically, we've now added our contact in. We've said that it's the most important step. Again, we've said it's the buyer, so it knows exactly where to place the buyer signatures, the buyer tags, and now we're going to jump over to step 4. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, step 4 and step 5 confused me when I first started using this program, and it's simply because if you look at step 4, it's called forms. If you look at step 5, it's called documents. Well, it kind of seems to me that forms and documents would be the same thing, but let me explain. In this program, forms are going to be the pre-fillable forms, meaning all the ones that TransactionDesk has gone in, put the blanks in so you can just fill them out. Documents are going to be anything that's outside of those forms, meaning if you wanted to bring a copy of the EMD in, maybe you wanted to bring in a signed home warranty form. Maybe you wanted to bring in some additional pieces to be part of your transaction, maybe pre-title, a survey, things like that. Those would be good examples of outside forms, outside documents, I'm sorry. So on your Documents tab, this is also where you're going to find that it automatically brought in that seller's disclosure that Ed Martin's listing clients filled out. So instead of having to go get those additional pieces for my buyer to sign, it's already pulled those in for me so my buyer can sign everything in one convenient envelope. I don't have to piecemeal, okay, here's the seller's disclosure, okay, here's all your purchase contracts. No, I can actually send everything together so everything can be signed at once. Okay, makes it a little easier. Well, let's go back to forms. Again, when you're thinking of these forms, I'm just going to kind of do a little quick form preview. Right over here to the right, there are some menu dots. If I kind of want to take a look at a particular form to make sure that's the form that I was thinking it was, I can go over to that preview and I can see it's already starting to fill that information in. So if I blow this up a little bit, so hopefully you can see it, all that information is already starting to carry over. So I've got Ed Martin's brokerage, his contact information, his agent ID, his office ID. Do you see how much it's already carrying over right into my forms? Do you remember how I also said things that are included are carried over? So things that are included or excluded, those items are carried over. So the idea is I don't want to have to fill all of that in. I want it to come directly from the wizard. As you can see, that's already starting to take place. Right here, if I wanted to, I kind of am old school, so I remember if anybody remembers Marge Frazier, I used to love her. She used to be a big real estate teacher in this area. And she would always say, hey, if you're going to look like a duck and walk like a duck and act like a duck, you better be a duck and you better disclose that you're a duck, right? So it's kind of always taught that you had your agency disclosure as one of those first documents. And of course, by now, if you've shown the property in our example, you've already got your buyer representation agreement signed. And hopefully that's already in here as well. All right, so we've got our disclosure here. If I want to change the order of the forms, I'm simply going to drag and drop them into the order that I want. But let's go in and let's take a look at some of these forms. So I want to go in and maybe I want to open up my disclosure and make sure all the information is filled out. You can simply click on the form title and I can start scrolling through to make sure all the information is here. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, yep, it's got Joe Fumagalli, but it didn't have the licensee information. It didn't also put who you're representing. Well, that's because this particular form I could use with a buyer or a seller. So I have to go in and I want to obviously add that additional piece, like that I am a transaction coordinator, or if you're, a limited service agreement agent, I can add that in. But really, most of this information should be already carrying over right into your forms. And you'll see that as we look at some of these other forms. If I want to jump again to my purchase agreement to fill some additional things in, I'm going to click on that purchase agreement. And now I'm going to start filling in things like maybe I am putting on my purchase agreement that there's a certain commission that the buyer is asking from the seller. Again, this is a great place that we should be putting those items in now. But I also want to show you something else that most people don't know is here, and I love. When it comes to other terms and conditions, and especially with brokers now, making sure that their agents are inserting language on the commission that's expected to be paid. There is a way that a broker can go in and add in, as well as agents can do this too, but I recommend brokers do it so it's exactly the legal language that they want. There is a way that a broker can set up for the office an internal clause. So you can see I have this little clause button right up here at the top. When I am ready to start filling out my contracts, I want to go up to that clause library and I maybe want to use my office clauses. That allows me to grab legal language that my broker has already pre-approved for the office. So maybe my broker has a home warranty clause, buyer to pay home warranty not to exceed $400 to be provided at closing, something like that. Maybe I also have a seller concession clause. Sometimes it just comes down to, you'll prepare your documents and all of a sudden you've got the language just perfect. It sounds exactly like you want it to. The next time you try to prepare that same thing and you're like, how did I say that again? You got to go all the way back to your contract and look how you stated it. It's much easier if you just create a clause, because watch what happens. Now, when I apply those clauses, I could maybe I could just take out, maybe I want to say not to exceed $400. I can actually do that here. From here, I'm going to go ahead and say not to exceed 400, and I'm going to type that in. But do you see how I don't have to create that legal language? I'm literally just pulling it from what my broker has already pre-approved. Now I'm going in and filling anything additional into my purchase agreement. Like maybe I'm putting a counteroffer date, which if I had taken the time to fill into the wizard would actually be here. And I can go in and fill out anything additional. As you can see, it's already putting Joe Fumagalli, our buyer, here, and it's placing his signature under the appropriate lines. And of course, when we start Authentisign, it's also going to place those additional tags for me. There's also some markup tools. So let's pretend for a moment this was a purchase agreement that you received from another agent. Maybe you needed to strike something from a particular document. you can use those markup tools to actually strike something off of the contract. Now, I want to put a caveat in here because I got kind of yelled at the other day. So I don't want to get yelled at again. So I'm just going to put this out here. If you are coming in from one of our vendored MLSs, I am aware that there are, because we vendor 10 MLSs, if you're coming in from some of the vendored MLSs, I'm aware that some of you don't allow markups on your contract, meaning that there are certain MLSs that do not allow their contracts to be marked up in any way. It has to go on a certain change addendum. If that is your MLS or brokerage policy, that's totally fine. Definitely do that. And if you're not sure, check with your broker, because the idea is we really want you to follow what your MLS policies are and your broker policies. Where I am, we are allowed to strike off things, but we have to have all parties obviously initial or sign by those changes. But again, not everybody has that same policy. So if you are with one of our vendored MLSs and your policy is to never mark up a contract, just disregard I said that. Certainly you want to use your additional change addendum. Okay, so I kind of want to throw that out there. But there is also a bunch of other markup tools that do make it easy to change contracts or even highlight things. Maybe you want to highlight that you got them a 2-year home warranty or something like that. That's what these markup tools are for. There are also times, let me show you another good example here. I'm going to come up to our price. Let's say that Brittany and I are doing a deal, and Brittany sends me an offer for $324.9. And it's a great offer, but my seller's not going to take a penny less than $340. And if I want to keep a clean contract and I want to just mark up those changes, the problem is if you just do a cross off, let me show you. I need to do that. If I want to just mark up a change, go back here for just a second. Apologize. If I want to mark up a change, we really don't want to. Okay, kind of lost my internet connection there for a second. That's not a very good moment. No, I am having to log back in. I apologize. It's not the best connection here so far. Let me go. I'm just going to go right back in from the beginning here. And the good thing is it's going to autosave every 30 seconds. So all those changes we made are still going to be there when I go back and open up that transaction. Seems like I'm catching back up. So I apologize if there's a little lag. It seems like it was a little slow there for a second, but I seem to be catching back up. I know we've got a couple meetings going on here, so they're probably not making it easier. All right, so back into my wizard, and you can see it jumped us off exactly where we were. If I go back into that purchase agreement, if I want to mark something up, so let's say I'm doing an offer with Brittany, I'm looking at that price, I know that I need to counter that offer. Instead of having to start all over or have a messy contract that's got a bunch of gibberish on it, I really want to go up and I want to use those markup tools. So if Brittany says, you know what, Kelly, we're not going to include any of those items, those additional things you're asking for, I can go ahead and obviously change them here. But if I want to change the price or I want to counter the price, how do I do that? Especially if let's say they emailed you a contract and I need to now change that, but I want to make sure it's legible. You can always go back to that markup tool at the top and you can do basically a text box, if you will. And here's kind of my way to talk about text box. I kind of like to do the text box in an area that's blank, so that you can kind of see what you're working with first. But I also have a little OCD, so I really wanted to match. I would be really remiss to leave it looking a hot mess. So let's say I'm offering $349. Now watch what would happen if I just lay this on top. You can't even read what that is, right? It looks a mess. You can't tell what it's supposed to be. So I can see the typeset is pretty close. So maybe I want to bump it up to 9. Maybe I think that's a little closer. By right-clicking, I can actually change font. I can change the font size. I can make it italicized or bold so it matches the contract. But the real problem with this is if I lay it on top, you can't read it. So what I really want to do is I want to right click and I want to change that from transparent to white. All right. So now what I want to do is I actually want to reshape that box. And again, you can make it larger, you can make it smaller. And now I want to lay it onto the contract. You see how it doesn't, now it's not looking messy. You can read it, and I can obviously put it onto that contract so that it's transparent. Like if you wanted it to be transparent, which I do not, or I can go ahead and I can change it to that solid background so that it looks appropriate on my contract. All right. So keep in mind the markup tools are right up here. There's also other ones like back in the day, we were always taught by Marge Fraser to never ever leave any contract area blank. So if you have an area that you just want to put asterisks in to show that it's not blank, I'm trying to find a good example here. I'll take my clauses out. We'll use this one. You can actually go in and you can use those asterisks or redacts, they're called, and you can actually fill something in. So if you wanted to kind of create, and I don't use this a whole lot. This back in the day, this was a little more popular, but it just kind of will put those asterisks in. So it doesn't look like you had blank lines or you forgot to fill it out. So you can actually fill out blank lines that way. Most people don't do that anymore, but that is available. So basically, I'm going through, I'm filling out my forms. If I want to jump to an additional form, I'm simply going up to my transaction forms. Maybe I want to take a look at my affiliated business arrangement. And again, if I want to jump to that form, I'm just clicking on that form title to make any changes to that document. Okay. Under file, you could go ahead, you could add a new form if you forgot a form. A lot of people will ask me, you don't really need to save it. We'll auto save every 30 seconds for you. But people often ask me, why is there a copy form? This I find I only have used this in one scenario, so I'll kind of explain. If you are doing a seller's net out, and I don't know about most people, but if you're doing a net out, I generally will do a seller's net out at a higher price and a lower price. So instead of going back in and filling out all the items, when many of them are the same, like the home warranty fee is the same, or if there's a particular fee that's the same, it's a little easier for me to just go back and copy the form and then change those prices that may not be the same. So I can change obviously to a higher sales price, lower sales price, and then obviously the commission amounts might change. But I can do all of that by simply copying the form, not having to start from scratch. So I thought that was really the only time I would copy a form. You can erase if you started filling out a form and you go, oh, geez, I totally messed this up. I didn't mean to do that. You can obviously erase everything or erase all the pages at once. You can watermark contracts confidential or draft. Maybe you want to send a draft of the offer to purchase when you meet the buyer so they aren't so nervous filling out their first offer to purchase like we used to. You can obviously print forms. You can send forms via email, via fax. Of course, you can still mark them up from here. So really, they're just a bunch of tools. You can change fonts, you can change colors, all of those right in your toolbar. So pretty self-explanatory. So we've got now our forms filled out. I want to show you a couple other things here too. So think of that like your forms editor, right? We've put the forms in the order we want them to go in our email, especially if they're going to be signing them. Again, we can do that by dragging and dropping them into the appropriate position. But now we also, let's say we got all the way to this step and we want to add in a pool addendum. Okay, so we got all the way here. We're like, oh, geez, my broker's got all these great forms here, but I want to add in an additional form. Or maybe you want to add in one of your local board forms, or maybe you want to add in a Michigan Realtor form. You can simply click on Add, and that's going to open up all of the libraries that are available to you, like our copyright forms. Right now, that's a big industry lawsuit right now. A lot of people, especially photographers, that say, I didn't give you permission to use that photo on a different website. And so we do recommend using those copyright forms, but you're going to find all of those libraries right here. Problem is, there's so many forms here. What if you're looking for a specific form? Like, let's say we're looking for that pool addendum. You can always go up to that box right here at the top, And you can quickly find, if by typing in a keyword like pool, you can quickly find all your pool addendums that you have access to. Maybe you're looking for an FHA form. Simply type in FHA and you'll see all the FHA forms from both your company, your local boards, your MLSs, so you can choose the right one. So even if you don't have a specific form, you can always go in and add it. But the key really is to have a generic template. So most of the forms you need on a consistent basis are dropped right in for you. And then you can just go find any additional form that you might need. Okay, so let's talk about documents now. So as you can see, the seller's disclosure that Ed Martin's seller filled out, remember we wanted to pull that in so when we're sending things over to our buyer to sign, that's already here. So if I click on that document, I can actually see actually this one's an exemption, but that exemption is right here for me. So that buyer can sign that from one convenient spot. Things like the lead-based paint, they filled that out. I have that right in front of me, and they can sign everything with their purchase agreement contracts. All right, looks like we might have a question. Let me jump over there. Okay. So it sounds like Samuel is using Berkshire Hathaway. If there is a form, let's say it's a company form, and I know Berkshire Hathaway just changed a lot of their forms recently, as most people did, right? If that is the case and it's not carrying over something that it should, what you can do is you can circle that on the form and you can send that form to me and I will ask them to auto populate it. So what we do is we generally will check with the broker and make sure that's what's supposed to auto populate on that form. In this case, if it's a buyer name, that's usually a really easy one. It should say buyer name and it should carry that over. So if there is something on your company form, especially with forms changing so much in this last couple of months, if there's something that's not carrying over, just let us know. We'll reach out to TransactionDesk and we'll get it corrected right away. And we have a good form contact over there, and they usually can fix those right away for us. Okay, so if something's not auto-populating on your company forms, certainly get that to us and we'll get that fixed for you. Good questions. Don't forget to ask those questions as we're going through. So thanks for asking that, Samuel. All right, some other things that are automatically included in your documents area. If a broker has a specific form, they can actually put that form what's included in their home warranty. So if there are additional documents that are not included in your forms, this is where they're going to go. Now, for brokers, you can set that home warranty brochure, or maybe you have like Ed Martin is on a team and he has these great Remax team, talks about what his team does, and he has that inserted right on his template. So anytime he's working with a buyer, they automatically have that team brochure that goes out to his buyers when they're signing their purchase agreement, talking about how big his team is and who they are in the industry. That automatically goes out with the signing of the documents or when he emails documents. If you want to bring an outside document in, it's pretty simple. All you're going to do is you're going to click on add. There's a couple ways you can bring it in. You can email documents in. You can drag and drop. Let's see if I have anything in my, let's see if I have anything I can quickly grab. If there's a particular document I want to bring, I can literally drag and drop it onto that strip. So I'm going to just grab this document talking about taxes in Sterling Heights. I'm going to drag that onto this little bar. As soon as I let go, you can see that's actually been added. You can actually add up to 30, is it 20 or 30? 20. You can add up to 20 files at one time by simply just dragging and dropping them. Or let's say you have a whole listing file folder and you've saved all the listing documents on your desktop and you want to pull them in now. You can simply click on that bar and you can say, okay, I want to drag this one, this one, this one, and this one in. And you can see just how fast it's pulling all of those outside documents in. So think of like EMDs, pre-approvals, home warranty brochures, pre-title, things that you want to include right in your document section. A good example is now that there's such a low amount of inventory, if you want to set up a buyer file with your buyer representation agreement, which you should be having signed before you show any properties, if you're not hearing that enough lately. But I also put things like their pre-approval letter in here. And this allows me when I'm writing an offer from someone's kitchen and I want to get it in right away, I have all of those additional pieces to write it right there, right? I don't have to I don't have to wait and look for that pre-approval. I've got it right in their file, their buyer representation agreement right in their file. So I'm really ready to go and write that offer at any time. All right, so congratulations. You've gone through the entire offer process. And I know what you're probably thinking right now. Well, Colleen, that took a long time. On average, really, it's about 7 minutes to go through that wizard, fill that out, and then go back through and fill in anything additional into your contracts. So it really doesn't take that long. I just went the long way and sort of gave you all the bells and whistles that you could do. So when you're ready now, to send these documents over. We're going to go through the signing, but all of your documents are prepared. I'm going to take you through sending via signing and via email at the end. But as I mentioned, the one thing about TransactionDesk that took me a minute to get used to was that the hardest part, I really think, is that when you're on the selling side, when you're working with a buyer, you're starting from the property you showed. So the most confusing part of TransactionDesk is that you start in two different places, if that makes sense. If you're on the buy side, to kind of recap what we did, it's in the MLS. We showed it. Now we want to click that blue splash and we want to carry it over into TransactionDesk. And you're probably thinking, well, why would you start in two different places? Well, on the listing side, especially if it's never been listed before, now I don't want to start in the MLS. And even if it has been listed before, but with another agent, do you really want to trust that they put in all of the information correctly? I mean, have you seen some of the things other agents put in there? I literally had an agent call me this week, kid you not, can't make this stuff up. And she said she was arguing with me over she received a $30 fine. And I said, well, it says here that the property is in Rochester and the property is not in Rochester. And she said, I know, but Rochester is more desirable. So I want it to be listed in Rochester. And I'm like, okay, just because you want it to be in a different city than it's located, it does not work like that. So really, when you're entering a listing, do you want to pull it from the tax records, or do you want to trust that another agent previously put it in correctly? The answer is you want to pull it from the tax records, right? So that's why you start in two different places. If you've shown the property and you're working with a buyer, you want to use that easy button and pull that information over. Yes, you still want to review it, but usually when that agent's putting in the information, that's the place that most of that information is correct. You do want to double check it, but if it's your listing, you want to go the extra mile. You always want to pull it from the tax records. So let's take a look at where we do that from. All right. So if I'm going in and I'm pulling from the tax records to start a listing, that's when I'm going to go to resources. And I'm going to go right into the TransactionDesk program. Okay, I've actually got it open up here, so I'm going to close that first, just so it's not so confusing. I'm going to go to resources. By the way, resources is where you find all the great products and tools and services you get with your membership. So if I'm looking for Cloud CMA, if I'm looking for showing time, if I'm looking for online forms, and I can go either into Authentisign or TransactionDesk right from here. So I'm going to say, I want to go into TransactionDesk and I want to start a brand new listing. Okay. The broker, by the way, has their own dashboard. So a broker can assume an agent. If an agent is out, let's say for a medical condition, they want to assume an agent's files to be able to assist with a closing or something like that. They can do that. They can see what transactions are being written in the office. They can impersonate an agent, meaning just that they can log in as that agent and kind of see where things were left. I want to jump over to our transactions themselves. So when you click over to the house here on the left, and hopefully you can see that okay, that's going to be a list of all of the transactions that you've previously created. But in this case, I want to create a brand new transaction right from the tax records. But there is an easy button, but there's kind of a secret to it. So let me show you. So in this case, I want to go over to the add button and I want to create a new transaction. Now, I always like to give my transactions a street name. And the reason is if you call it Joe Fumagalli and Joe Fumagalli hopefully buys 3 or 4 houses from you, and you're trying to find that specific transaction, you got to open 3 Joe Fumagallis, right? That doesn't really make sense. So if you do want to include the name, just do a dash afterward. Makes it a little bit easier to find it, that specific transaction. Obviously, if I'm creating a listing, well, I want to pull in my listing package. So all of my forms are loaded for me. Here's where the part the little trick that I mentioned, I don't want to pull from the MLS, right? I don't want to pull from my real source. I actually want to pull from the tax records. So I'm going to use real list and pull in the property information. So I'm going to collect real list, but this is where that little kind of secret comes in. Instead of having to go back to the listing, find the tax ID, or look up the tax ID in the property records, here's a little secret. If you just go over to the magnifying glass to the right, you're going to elect which county that property's in. So I'm going to say I'm taking a listing in Macomb County, but here's a trick. If you fill out all of this information, I can guarantee you it will not work because tax records are so exact. You really want to fill out only these 3 pieces of information. And I say this all the time, and people constantly say, no, I'm going to fill it all out. And they always call me and say it didn't work. So here's what you want to know. You want to put in the county, the street number, so only the street number, and the route street name. So this happens to be Wessel Drive. Leave off the drives, the ways, the courts, the places. You want to make it just basic so it matches the tax records. It'll find things that have more. You don't want it to see Boulevard and you've spelled out Boulevard and the tax record is BLVD period, right? Because now it's not going to find it. So that's why you really want to use just the county and the street number and the route street name. It's kind of like Google. Less is best, right? I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, I want to search the tax database. Immediately, you can see it just found that property address. I'm going to check it off and I'm going to hit select. It's now going to insert that tax ID for me. I'm ensuring that that is the right property. And now I'm going to create my listing right from there. I'm going to show you a couple other cool things here. From here, you can see it's already started to carry in those lengthy legal descriptions, the tax numbers, the subdivision, all that stuff starting to autofill for me. But if I jump over to step 3, and this is my favorite part of using the tax ID, it's also bringing in the seller's names. So the seller of record is coming in and it's identified them as the sellers. So it knows where to place their name on the listing contracts. And it also knows where they're going to need to sign on all of my contracts. So I love that. Brokers can go in and auto tag in Authentisign. So if you are a broker and you're noticing, oh, my tags don't automatically appear like that lady with the fuzzy hair said they would, well, you can go in and you can actually set up broker templates in the signing program so that if you want your agents to sign in an additional place or you have broker forms that aren't auto tagged, you can actually do that as the broker. All right, so we've got the seller coming in here, but I want to show you on the listing side some really cool improvements. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit next. This, of course, has brought in all my listing agreement forms. Again, if I want to put my disclosure into place, I just drag it and drop it. But I want to show you the data sheet. And I kind of want to explain how this works because it may not make sense when I explain. So I'm going to show it to you and explain it at the same time. The data sheet is really where you're gathering all the data about the house, right? And in my office, some people turn their data sheets in to the front desk, and then the front desk adds their listing. So what was happening is they were filling all of this data sheet out, printing off the data sheet, and then handing it to Colleen at our office. And then Colleen was having to go put these 300 fields of information manually into Paragon, which is a lot of extra steps, right? Because you've already filled it out. Now she's got to rekey everything. In a previous brokerage I was at, and these, ladies who work at the front desk, they're doing so much and working so hard. They're getting ready for a closing that's happening. They're scheduling showings. They're the phone's ringing. They're answering, the phones. They're helping and assisting agents. So this particular piece of vacant land that I had was worth about $30,000, and it went in at $300,000. Right, pretty big difference. It's big, because she was rekeying every single thing, and some obviously got overlooked, and an extra zero got added. So it's so much easier when you fill out the data sheet in TransactionDesk and you click the upload button. And I'm going to explain why. One, if you put in your own listings, it takes all the information you just filled into the data sheet and it makes the listing for you in Paragon. Doesn't make it live. What it does is it fills everything in for you to review. Then you can add your photos, hit save, and you've made it live. What it does on the admin side, if your admins are in charge of reviewing the listing first or re-entering the information, the admins get everything that you just pushed from the data sheet. They don't have to re-enter a thing. They can go in and review it, maybe add photos for you, and then save it, and your listing is live. So they don't have to rekey it. It goes from a 15-minute or 20-minute process down to a 30-second process to make sure that your listings get in faster. It also doesn't make the listing live immediately because we want you to add your photos first. And I don't know if you know how photos work in the MLS. So I'm just going to kind of explain why you always want to add your photos first, because I did not know this and I had some very angry seller calls and I could not figure it out. So I'm going to share it with you. What happens in the MLS is when photos get added, they, especially with us, because we use high resolution photos, many sites like Zillow, Realtor.com, they pull these photos in a feed. But our contract with Zillow for our brokers is that with Zillow, every 15 minutes, they pull a feed and they get text changes. So if you change a price, if you change your comments, if you add an open house, all those things are text changes. So they get those in 15 minutes and then things are updated. However, photos, because they are so large and with the high resolution photos and having up to 99 photos, that slows processing down. So if you're Zillow or Realtor.com and you're taking things in a feed, that takes a lot of bandwidth to pull all of those in. So most of them only pull every 24 to 48 hours when it comes to photos. So what that means, and it kind of works, I tell people this is the best way I can think of, kind of like a bus. Pretend this is a bus. If your data, if you're listing, if you save it without photos, and let's say that bus is pulling in right as they're doing that pull, well, then it might only be a few minutes till your photos are updated. However, if the bus just left the station and it only pulls every 48 hours, that means it's 48 full hours before those listings are added to, or those photos are added to your listing. And what that can mean is when it's going out in the in IDX sites, when they're getting it in the Collab Center or Realcom portal, they're all getting it with no photos. And that's terrible. You don't want that, right? That's going to really make your seller very unhappy, which is why they called me not happy. So don't do that. You want to always add your photos first before you save your listing, because otherwise you may have that long period where your listing does not have photos. And with things selling so quickly, having the photos is crucial. Also, if you haven't checked out Kubacasa, our latest program that we released, our free floor plan scanning app, I just got the new enhancements that came out yesterday. I just got them to play with. They're not live yet. And I get more impressed with this product every moment. It's a great way, literally from your phone, that you can walk through your listing. It measures the rooms for you. It figures out square footage for you. You can now even, this isn't common knowledge yet, but you can now even take photos while you're doing your scan, and it will upload them to the new view, their new AI view. It's really, really cool. You can do unlimited scans. There's no cost for the setup. There's no cost for the app. There's no cost for the scans. If you go over 5,000 square feet, like if you have a luxury listing, it's $11.25 is what they charge you. But I have to tell you, it's so super easy. It's literally hitting the record button and walking through. So if you haven't taken our Kubacasa class, definitely take that. That's coming up. I'll show you where you can register at the end. But I say that because Kubicasa, you can add those floor plans with the square footage and the room measurements right into your photos in the MLS. You can also add them as a document in the document section so they can be included in both. So I'm super impressed with that. If you haven't checked that out, definitely do so. Hear a dog all of a sudden. Sorry about that. So hear a dog all of a sudden. Okay, so the data sheet. Let's get back to that. Apparently, someone brought their dog today. Let's go back to our data sheet. When you're entering in all the information here, obviously everything red is going to be required. Once I've filled out all of the red areas, in order to make this a listing, I'm just going to go up to this upload listing button. So I'm just going to click, obviously I need to fill in all the red that would be required for this to be full, but I don't want to keep you here all day doing that. So I'm going to click the upload listing button. I'm going to show you what happens. Basically, when I click that button, it's creating a partial listing for me and my admin. My admin can also view this. So my admin and I can go in and we can change things. If my admin goes in, she can see all of the partials. So let's say that, find mine here. Let's say that there is a particular partial that I have pushed over. She can actually go in and she can click open that partial. She can add pictures, she can add details, she can finish that partial for me. And all she has to do is hit save and that listing is going to be live. Same thing for me. If I've pushed my partial, I can go back in and I now can finish it up, put my disclosures in, put my pictures in, and I can make that listing live. So by just filling in the data sheet, and again, you do have to fill in the required, I can click that upload and save myself a tremendous amount of time. Okay, so that's really the big thing. We talked about the buy side. We've gone through creating a new listing. Right over on the left-hand side, there are some additional options here too. So I'm just kind of going to go back to my transaction page just so you can kind of see it. Over here, they do have a preferred partners plan. I don't really do that, but I want to talk about creating your own templates. If you are not with a brokerage that has templates created, or if you've looked at the template and for some reason it just doesn't work for you, it has too many forms, or maybe specific forms aren't there that you require, you can click on templates and you can create your own templates. So I'm going to show you that. So right over here to the left, there's a bunch of icons. One of them is the template option. I'm going to say I want to create a transaction template. Any template that you see that has two entities by it, that means it's available for the office. So my office has gone ahead and created a buyer packet and a listing packet. And actually, Brittany, since you're on, she did a lease packet, a commercial packet. So all of these great templates are set up by my brokerage for me to use. If you don't have templates, it's as simple as creating the add button, creating a personal template. So maybe I want to call this Colleen's Awesome Listing Packet. Oops. Helps if I spell correctly, right? All right. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to create my listing packet. And I'm going to say I want that to be what I would use on a residential listing. I can even put a description in. And I've just now created the template. But now I want to add in my forms. So I can go right down here to forms. I want to use obviously my company forms. Maybe you're using the MAR forms, doesn't really matter. So I'll go down to MAR here to be a little more generic. And maybe I want to use the new MAR purchase agreement. Maybe I want to use the MAR disclosure. Maybe I want to, I certainly want to have my buyer representation. Hopefully I said that enough. I think I said it like 22 times today. So I'm going to add in all of the forms that I want. Again, if you're using some Michigan Realtor forms, some company forms, some MLS forms, make sure you got the My Real Source data form in there. All you have to do is go into that library and pick those specific forms. Once you do this one time, it is all set up for you. So I want to make sure that I have my Real Source data form, my data sheet for residential, which is going to be this one right here. And I also want to have my Real Source buyer representation agreement, 3 of them to choose from, so they're all different, but I'm going to use my, let's see which one. Use my buyer representation agreement. And any other form that would be required. So basically, you're just adding them in from different libraries. If you have some outside documents you want to add as the broker, maybe you're with ABC Realty and you've got all these great marketing pieces that you want to add that you want your buyer to automatically get with their offer to purchase. You could actually drag those in. So that's part of your package. Brittany, I know we were talking before about bringing in that home warranty brochure. This is where you're going to do that. You're going to bring that home warranty brochure right in to your documents area in your template. And then every time an agent starts a transaction, it's right there for them. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Looks like we got another question. So let me jump over there. My connection seems to be yes, so there's a couple questions. So if you had a little bit of problems watching the class, or it lagged, and it's a couple people have said that, so I'm sure it's probably on my end, and I apologize. But I'm going to show you where you can find that class right now. Okay, so let me go back. So hopefully you're caught back up with me, but just in case, where you find all of our classes that we record, and it does take me usually about 24 hours to get them uploaded. All you have to do is go to resources, and you're going to go to the education area. Okay, so you're going to go to resources, education, and you will find recorded webinars. So hopefully everybody can hear me right now since I'm going through this. If for some reason you missed anything from today, again, I am recording it, so it should be fine for my microphone. But if you missed anything, you can go to recorded webinars. And that'll take you right to our YouTube channel. All you have to do is click on videos. Every one of our classes is recorded and they're here. Matter of fact, we just did a cloud CMA class. You'll find that one. Collaboration Center was 2 days ago. You'll find that class. All you have to do is click on it. You can watch the entire class and fast forward to that point that you might have missed. So keep in mind, we record every single class, and it will have the date next to it, by the way, so you'll know the exact date that that class was recorded. So you'll see today's date along with TransactionDesk and Authentisign. So really good question. Okay, so I talked about a couple other classes that we have as well. Let me show you where you can find those, like the Cuba Casa class. If you click on resources, and you go to that education area again, you'll find the education corner. This is where you can sign up for future classes. If you're interested in the Cuba Casa, which I can't say enough good things about, you can go right to that particular page, and you can click the register here and sign up for the class just like you did for this one. Cuba Casa is coming up on October 9th. So actually, I think it's next week, next Wednesday. And we're going to be doing live scans from that one. So we'll actually not only just show it to you and, kind of go through the app and how to set it up, but we'll actually be doing live scans from my house. So you can kind of see it walking through and exactly what the process is. There's another great class that I got to tell you about because it always fills up right away. And that is Taylor Fidawa's real estate photography class. She actually has a degree in photography and marketing. And it's a 3-part class. It's only offered once or twice a year, so it always fills up, but I want to tell you about it. I thought I took pretty good pictures until I took her class, but she actually walks you through shooting those hard to photograph areas, like long bridgeways or hallways. Whenever I took them, they always kind of looked short and dumpy. She shows you how to add things like more aperture and control your shutter speed to elongate the photo. She'll show you how to add more light to your photos. And then, so there's part 1 and part 2, which will go over techniques. If you take part 1 and part 2, in the spring, she has what we call the photo field trip. She actually takes you to a fully furnished model. She sets you up in 3 really hard to photograph areas like those little powder rooms, or she'll set you up in an area that's generally a little more tricky, like a hallway or a room that you need to elongate a little bit. And then she'll help you critique your photos right there. So that when you leave, you're taking even better photos. So those are great classes. You can, again, find that right under Paragon, resources, and under that education area. Okay. So lastly, I want to go in as we wrap up. And thanks for those who are hanging in. I apologize. That sounds like there is some internet connectivity issues. So thanks for hanging in with me. I promise we're almost done. We got one more last thing to go over, and that is Authentisign. So that's the signing. So we created our packets. We created a new listing. We went through that offer process. But how do we go in and how do we get our clients to sign? And how do we set that up? Well, the good news is if you've done everything I showed you up to now, you've added in the contact information, you've added in their email address, the signing process is a breeze and usually takes just a couple of seconds. I don't ever like to start a signing if I haven't created the transaction. Because one, the whole idea is if you create the transaction with the contact names and the forms that are going to be signed, the rest is a breeze. So let's take a look at it. Over here on the left side, and by the way, you can do this in the transaction too, but what you're looking for is you're just looking for this pen icon. That's just the signing icon. This will tell you the status. If something is in draft, that means that you, the agent, are still working on it. It has not made it to any clients. If it expired, the client didn't sign it, you can see that as well. If it was completed by all the parties, you'll see that here too. If it was only completed by one of the parties, you'll see that here as well. So let's take a look at this. When I'm ready to start a new signing, just kind of following along what we've done today, I'm going to go to Add. Where it says, and this is the biggest thing, where it says optional, I never want you to think of this as optional, because if you miss this step, your signing is going to take a whole lot longer and it's going to be a lot more work. And you're going to say, that lady with the fuzzy hair, she said this was easy, and it won't be. It will be a lot more steps. So I guarantee you what you want to start off with is you want to click where it says optional. Don't think of it optional. You want to click what a transaction you're assigning this to. Okay, so think of all your signings as kind of like an envelope. You want to send your envelope out and you want to assign it to where you want it to show back up. Of course, it will show up on the status page, but if you send documents, they can automatically go right back into your transaction. So I'm going to say I want to have everything go back into my 22 Mile Road. Everything that they sign, I want to be recorded in that file. So I'm going to go ahead and tie the signing name to that transaction. So I'm going to say that this is my offer to purchase, and I'm going to hit save. That's literally going to do the same thing. It's going to take you into a really easy wizard, and it's just going to ask you these couple of things along the right side. The first thing is, who do I want to send it to? Okay, so I'm going to click on, I could add myself, I could add a new person, I could add from my contacts, but I did that already. I don't want to have to redo any work. So I'm going to pull my contact names right from the transaction. Yes, Ed Martin was the listing agent, right? And I also am going to witness my contracts. On an email. This is where you're setting up a title company or a lender or someone that you only want to get the transaction documents if everybody signed it. So for instance, your title company probably doesn't care before you have a signed PA anything about that transaction. So I can CC my title person. Once everyone signed it, it's automatically delivered to my title company with my personal message for that person. So it's just a way to sort of organize it and send it without having to touch it again. If everybody signs it, we got a deal. I want it to go over to my title company. The next thing is, if I'm sending it to these three parties in this scenario, I certainly don't want to send it all at the same time to all three, right? Because if Joe Fumagalli has not signed it yet, gonna look pretty silly sending it to the co-oping agent. So of course there's a signing order, and that's what I need to determine. Of course, if you're just sending it to your side of the transaction, maybe it's a husband-wife, You could send them at the same time. That doesn't really matter, right? But if you're going to include that other agent into the mix, you want to make sure that you've got them in the logical order of real estate. You don't want to send it to the co-oping agent before your buyer has signed it. So I'm going to say I'm going to slide that toggle on, and I'm going to put them in the order that I want it to go. So of course I want my buyer to sign it first. Then I kind of like to review it one more time before I witness it, make sure I got all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and all the tags in place. And then, of course, I want it to go directly to Ed Martin. And again, if they're not signing it, I can certainly just make Ed Martin the CC. He's just going to get a copy once my buyer signed it and once I've witnessed it. So really easy to do that. The next thing is, what forms do I want to send? Well, remember, we did all that hard work too. So what we want to do now is we just want to go into the transaction, and anything that's in there. Remember how I said it brought over his lead-based paint? Perfect. Remember how I said it brought over his seller's disclosure? I can literally just click to add all of the forms that I want. Of course, I want my buyer to have my disclosure. I, of course, want him to sign the purchase agreement, but I want to have it in one easy package, right? If I want something to be in first, I want my disclosure, of course, to be first. I've already signed my buyer representation agreement. I'm going to go ahead and put my purchase agreement next, so I can actually drag and drop them into the order I want them to be. It usually loads them in the order you've already placed in your transactions, by the way. If you want to add an outside document, of course, you could do that, but I do recommend doing all of that right in TransactionDesk itself. All right, so as we scroll through, do you see how the tags are already applied for me? These happen to be my brokerage forms, but the association and MLS forms are already done as well. If your broker doesn't have the tagging set up, this is something they can do right within the broker tools, and they can take the broker class. We'll show them how to do that too. But let me show you some of the other tags that you can add. So of course, every person does have a place to sign. I'm gonna go to where we would witness. So as you can see, my witness is already applied here. Brittany's already set these up for us, so thank you, Brittany. If I want to add something, let's say that I want to add where an email address goes for my buyer. I can do that. If I've gotten all the way to this point, I forgot to mark something up. Well, I can do that too. You can also do the strike throughs and everything here, but there's a couple I want to show you because I think that they're really good. The one I want to show you is the radio choice. Sometimes there'll be an option. And what I mean by that is sometimes I will ask them, do you want to have a home warranty or don't you? If you made both of these check boxes optional, guess what would happen? They would check both of them, and then you'd have an invalid contract. But what you can do is include these radio choices that they can check yes or no, but of course they can't check both. It's only going to allow them to check one or the other. There is drop downs. You can actually assign and put something in the drop down. What do you want to be there? Yes or no? Or if you have something specific that you want them to click, you can also make it required or optional. So different options like that. You can also have initials that they choose, yes or no. I want to initial here or don't. So there's several different options under the tools. But of course, we do want to make sure we've got a signing place for everyone that we've selected except Ed. He's just automatically going to get a copy when we both signed it. And then lastly, I'm just going to go ahead and hit next. And I can give it an expiration date. I can even put a customized message in for the title company, or, hey, here's our offer. Please see expiration date, something like that. Then lastly, all I have to do is send that and we're ready to go. So in this case, I've got my order already predetermined. I've got the documents that I want to send, whether they were, documents we brought over from the other transaction, meaning, or the other party, like the seller's signed seller's disclosure. And now I'm ready to go ahead and send those documents. Okay, now it's in status. The last thing I just want to cover is, what does it look like when your buyer actually receives them? What does it look like when they're going to set up their signature? So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my Yahoo Mail really quick. I hate all these third-party authentications now, so give me one quick second. And now I just kind of want to show you, what does it look like when your buyer goes in? Is it hard for them to sign? How do they set up their signature? They can use a signature if they have a signature in place already. They can use that, or they can script, they can actually do it with their fingertip. But when you're sending it to your buyer, you can simply click on it. As you can see, it's coming from me. It has my contact information there. And all they have to do, it's coming from you, the agent, because they're never going to know who Authentisign is, right? So all they have to do is click Start Signing. I accept. And sorry about that. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and simply apply that. Now, again, if they wanted to draw theirs out, and I'm not very good with the mouse, but I could draw my signatures out too. They could pick a font or upload their own signature. Once they set their signature, it's going to guide them to every place that you set up for them to sign or initial. Okay, and that's it. So pretty easy. One last thing I wanted to cover, there's been some changes in the way sellers' disclosures are signed. And it used to be that when you were sending out a seller's disclosure, you could send it ahead to your sellers, and they could only fill out the seller's disclosure. They couldn't actually sign it, and there is a reason for that. In order to be legal and binding in all 50 states and be UTA compliant, it had to meet some requirements. And one of those requirements that it had to meet was it had to be a locked document. So up to recently, there was really no way to send the seller's disclosure, have them fill it out, and sign it in one step. So what I would do is I'd send it ahead, they'd hit save, it comes right back to me, and then I would have them sign it at the listing appointment. And you could still do that if you wanted to. But they have a way now where if you send it in Authentisign, they can actually fill it out and sign it in the same step. So it has kind of changed from where it was previously. I'm just going to kind of turn off my camera here just to make sure. All right, so when you are in Authentisign, if you wanted to send your, let's say your Michigan Realtor seller's disclosure, let's say most people are using that, or maybe your company seller disclosure. I am going to just say, do this kind of quickly. I'm just going to start assigning, and I'm going to pull a document in. So I'm going to say that I'm going to send this to my seller, make it Colleen DeLang in this case, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab that document. Now, again, if you already have that document in a transaction, that certainly is the easiest way. So if I'm going to go into my files, and I'm going to just grab let's say an individual form. I'm going to quickly try to find my seller's disclosure here. Okay, that was pretty quick. All right, so when I'm sending this particular document, the important step in order for them to fill it out and for them to be able to sign it in one step is literally adding in the seller's information. So I want to make Colleen DeLang the seller. If I say that Colleen DeLang is going to be the seller, it's going to allow Colleen DeLang to be able to fill that in. So I'm going to say Colleen DeLang is not the listing agent, but she, in this scenario, is going to be our seller. Okay. If you say that that person is a seller, it's going to recognize that that person needs the ability to fill that document out and to sign it. So did you see how that worked? Kind of going to go over that again. The old Authentisign did not do this. You had to do it in 2 steps. And again, just to kind of clarify why it's different, before you could not sign it because it was not a locked document. The client was literally filling it out. The seller was, because this is a form we never fill out as agents, right? At least we shouldn't be. This is a form, obviously, that's only filled out by the seller. So in order to get that document to be able to be locked in Authentisign, and they can fill it out and apply the signature, you have to do this step now in Authentisign. And in order, when I first brought that in, you didn't see any of those dots where they could go in and fill it out, right? Because there was no seller role attached. So if I took the seller out right now, if I remove this seller, all those dots are going away, right? Because that's just the form. If I added a buyer to it, it wouldn't work either, right? Buyers don't fill out this form, they just sign it at the end. So this is filled out by the seller. So in order to be able to open that document up and be able to sign it, you have to do the step of assigning that seller role. So let's do that again. In order to assign that seller role, we're going to go to add a participant. I'm going to just add myself. We could add brand new. You could, I'll just add myself. That'd probably be easier. Okay, so we are going to go to signer. We're going to add myself, but I'm going to change my role. And this time I'm not going to be the agent. I'm going to be the seller. As soon as I save myself as the seller role, you see what happens? All of those dots to appear. This now allows me to send this over to the seller. They can fill it out and sign it and hit save, which comes immediately back to you as the agent. Okay, so I'd go ahead. I'm going to send this to that seller to fill out. When they receive it, now they're going to be able to fill in all of those circles. It will only allow them to pick one out of those, the columns, and then they can go ahead and fill those fields out and sign it all in the same step. Automatically comes back to you as the agent. All right, so I think I've got most of this. I do apologize. I know a couple people said they were experiencing some delays in the internet, and so I apologize for that. But I do want to tell you again, you can find this recorded class right under Resources, under the Education tab, Recorded Webinars. I'll also follow up with everybody and send the link for this class, just since there were a few hiccups. But you can find not only this class, but all of the other classes right under Resources, Education, and Recorded Webinars. So thank you so much for being with me. Thanks for hanging in there. If you do have any last questions, go ahead and type them in that box and we can get them addressed. I also did put some cheat sheets in the handout section of GoToWebinar. If you open up your GoToWebinar, right by the questions area, there is some cheat sheets on Authentisign and TransactionDesk, things like the document slicer, a couple of the more advanced tools. But it doesn't look like we have any questions. So thanks so much for your time today. Happy selling.